Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Dr. Michael Batu. Michael is an assistant professor of economics at the University of the Fraser Valley. His teaching and research interests include applied econometrics, applied macroeconomics, development economics, and economics pedagogy. His work has been published in economic journals. He earned his Ph.D. in economics from University of Guelph. It's a great pleasure to have you with me today, Michael.
Oh, thank you for inviting me to your show, David.
To start off, share with us what brought your interest in economics.
Oh, the story goes way back, David. When I was in high school, I always loved social sciences. Like history, economics. I love it, and that interest made me go to study economics. But in fact, my first love was law. I really wanted to become a lawyer. And David, back in the day, when you apply for university programs, and this is way back in the Philippines, at the time, David, there was no internet, there was no computer applications. It was all paper. You have to submit your applications in paper forms.
Right.
And when I was on campus in the college, it was a college then, and there were booths. So there was a booth for accounting or accountancy. There's booth for marketing. There's
Yeah.
booth for economics, etc. So different programs have booths, and then you have to line up there, and then you have to submit your paperwork.
Right.
When I saw, because I wanted to become a lawyer, so when I saw accounting, because I thought accountancy is a very good pre-law, program,
Yeah.
because you become an accountant and at the same time a lawyer.
Yeah.
That's actually a good career.
Yeah.
But I saw the lineup, David. It was so long, and I was in a hurry. And I saw economics. There was nobody there. So I went to the booth for econ, gave my file to the person in the booth, and then he looked at my paperwork, said like, all is in order. Okay, so you'll hear from us after a week or two, and then that's it. The rest is history. And my plan really, David, was when I get to economics program, I will
Right.
transfer to accountancy. That was my plan because I just don't want to go to that long. I just want to go through that long lineup. But eventually I learned to love it. So here I am now. I'm an economist. So that's how it all
Great.
began.
Great. Very nice story. Your PhD research focused on remittance effectiveness. Can you share a little bit about your PhD research?
Oh yeah. So remittance is basically these are money. These are monies that are sent by immigrants to their relatives back in their home countries. And by the way, remittances is not just an international phenomenon. It can be domestic too. So for example,
Okay.
if you have family, let's say in Toronto, and you
Yeah.
want to send them money, you can do an e-transfer. That
Yeah.
that can be considered as remittances. But the kind of
Okay.
remittances that I study, David, is
Mhm.
international. Okay,
Okay.
because there are countries where they systematically send their people overseas to work, and Philippines is one of those countries.
Sure.
And the idea is that when their people are outside the country, they remit back their earnings to help people in their home countries. But the research question there, David, is like this: why is it that there are some countries, for example, like Philippines and other countries in Central America, for example, where
Mhm.
remittances account to more than 10% of their gross domestic product,
Mhm.
but then they are not developing? Because the
Mhm.
idea is that these remittances can help improve human capital, it can help
Mhm.
improve nutrition, it can help improve many things in these countries. But how come these countries are still underdeveloped? So it
Okay.
was a very, to me, very interesting research question.
Mhm.
Because for one, I send remittances myself because I have
Yeah.
relatives in the Philippines.
Yes.
And I said, like, how come we haven't developed? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how it began. And I was able to look into as to why this is
Yeah.
happening. So that all of the answers to these question is in my dissertation.
Okay. What did you find some of the reasons from your research?
Mhm. So the idea, David, was like this: because remittances end up being consumed, so people just buy TVs.
Ah.
They buy air conditioned units, or they buy a new car. So essentially, these are durable goods, but they don't really contribute a lot in terms of long-term growth, right? So there are a few who use their remittances for human capital accumulation. So that's a good thing, right? But the issue with human capital accumulation, David, is that it takes a long time for it to be realized in the economy. Because you see, when you study, how many years is preschool, high school, college, masters, etc. So the fruits of human capital accumulation take a while to be realized. So that's one. There are also issues, David, with in some countries, and there's anecdotal evidence that people, they don't work at all. So that's actually one of the things that I found in the data, that in the tendencies that when remittances increases, unemployment tends to go up. Because what happens is that it's non-labor income. So if I'm a recipient of remittances, what ends up happening is I'm not going to work at all, because I have somebody from abroad who's sending me money in exchange for me working. So the tendency is unemployment tends to rise in communities where they receive a lot of remittances. And there are also other social ills that happen. So for example, there are communities in, this is anecdotal though, there were communities in India, for example, and in Brazil, where an increase in remittances is associated with drug abuse. Because now people can afford to buy narcotics. So there's a tendency for these things to happen. So so there are many channels through which remittances can adversely affect an economy. And I was able to uncover those, not necessarily in my dissertation, but in my other studies as well.
Your current work focuses on inflation and the cost of living. Please explain to us what inflation is.
Okay, so inflation is the increase in the price level. Okay, so in economics, the way Statistics Canada, for example, because we're in Canada, so Statistics Canada does it is they keep track of prices of goods and services that a typical Canadian would purchase in a given time. So there's actually, David, an entire division in Statistics Canada that does this. They just keep track of prices. And then what they do is once they have the data for the prices of these products, they develop an index, an index that consists of all of these products. So it's like a basket, of goods and services that an average Canadian would purchase. And that's what we call the consumer price index. Now, the inflation numbers that we see in the news, for example, what it is, it's simply by how much the consumer price index has increased within a year. So it's a year-to-year percentage increase. So for example, the latest figure that we have is around 4% inflation. That is what we call headline inflation. It compares the consumer price index from, let's say, last month, which was August 2023. We compare that with August 2022. So so that's how inflation is calculated. And if I may add, David, inflation is a very politically sensitive economic variable, because politicians care a lot about the rate of inflation, and along with unemployment. So these are the two things that they really keep track of regularly, because it directly affects everyone in the economy, more so poor people.
How does inflation affect the cost of living?
Well, the thing, David, is like this. It makes everything expensive. Okay? So when inflation is an indicator. If inflation is high, it's an indicator that cost of living has increased considerably. And what happens there, David, is that it lowers our purchasing power. Okay? So our dollar can only go so far when inflation is high. Okay. And by the way, David, whenever we see in the news, or we hear from the news that they're saying that inflation is slowing down, it doesn't mean that prices are not rising. Prices are still rising, although at a slower rate. So when they say that inflation is increasing, prices are increasing, but at an increasing rate. So when inflation rate is 0, for example, that means prices are neither increasing nor decreasing. So it just stays the same. So, but that happens sometimes, but most of the time, inflation stays in positive territory. So back to your question, it diminishes the ability of our dollar to buy. So that's essentially purchasing power. So it gets affected, especially David, for retirees, because
Right.
people who are retired, they receive
Fixed.
fixed income.
Right.
And fixed income people are the ones that are among the many that are adversely affected by high rates of inflation.
Do you have advice for consumers on how to respond during a recession?
Okay, so first off, so your question is a recession. So right now we're not yet in one. Okay,
Okay.
so because the classical definition of a recession, although the White House in the US have changed its definition to suit their
Okay.
political ends, but the
Okay.
classical textbook definition is when real gross domestic product declines for
Okay.
2 consecutive quarters. So
Okay.
we're not there yet because
Okay.
the last GDP growth figure that we have for the last quarter was, I think, 0.2%. Right? So
Okay.
we're still in positive territory for GDP. Now, to your question, what to do when there is a recession? Well, I lived in several recessions already in our lifetimes, David. We've lived through many
Yeah.
recessions already.
Yeah.
The most recent one, of course, we had COVID. So
Yes.
there was a COVID recession.
Yeah.
And then before that, there was the recession that was associated with the subprime mortgage
Yeah.
market in the US.
Real
So
estate.
those were the two major recent ones, although there wasn't
Yeah.
one in the 90s, etc. But
Yeah.
the most two recent ones was that. Now, the thing with Canada, David, is that we enjoy social protection. Okay, so
Yeah.
we have employment insurance.
Yeah.
So for people who got laid off during recessions, because the usual outcome of recessions is that there will be an increase in unemployment. Okay, so for unemployed, they have employment insurance. Many developing countries don't have this luxury. They don't have this, well, if I may use the word luxury there, but this kind of program. Okay,
Yeah.
they don't have this.
Yeah.
So for those people, it will be really, really difficult. But
Right.
for us here in Canada, in the West, we do have this kind of programs.
Right.
Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that we'll be complacent, because the idea, David, is that we save for the rainy days. So
Yeah.
saving is still important.
And
And what we saw recently in the data, and according to consumer surveys, David, is that Canadians are tapping now into their savings because of the increase in cost of living.
Yeah.
So at some point, if this cost of living crisis that we're at right now would continue on, I mean, at some point, those savings will run out. And in fact, many Canadians now are saying that it's the current cost of living crisis is giving them stress. So even if you save a lot, but then this cost of living crisis goes so long, we would have a situation where it would resemble what happened with the Great Depression in the 1920s.
Okay.
So I mean,
Yeah.
we're kind of headed, at least for Canada, we're kind of headed in a situation, although the cause is different, because the cause of the Great Depression were issues with the banking system in the US. But for us, it's more of cost of living.
Okay.
So I mean, the typical advice would be to save, and then for people who can afford to do so, find other sources of revenue, other sources of money coming in. So that would mean multiple jobs.
Yeah.
That would mean if you have remittances, if you have rich relatives elsewhere, you can ask them to send you money, right? So there are many ways to do it. But again, we can only do so much, David, if this cost of living crisis would go on and on and on. How long can we last? That's the issue. I mean, it's like a stress test, At some point, when will this break? Right? So and the government is actually correct in doing something. Recently they met the grocers, they're doing something on housing. But in my opinion, as an economist, I think they need to do a lot more to help ordinary Canadians to weather this cost of living crisis that we're in right now.
So do you think what else they can do? They're already doing some of the things you mentioned. What else
Oh,
you have suggestions for
okay.
our policymakers?
Yeah. David, am I allowed to share screen? I have something to
Yes,
show
yes,
to
yeah,
your
you can
viewers.
absolutely. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Of course,
I have
yes,
something to
yes.
show to your viewers. Probably
Oh,
your
yeah,
viewers have
that
seen
would be
this
nice.
already.
Please, yeah.
So, so you see in the screen
Ah,
for people who are watching this video, and David as well. So this
okay.
is data on housing prices and disposable income for
Mm-hmm.
US and Canada. Okay,
Okay.
so this data, the data for housing was based on a
Mm-hmm.
study by Mack and Martinez. They maintain a
Mm.
database of housing data of house prices across countries, and of course for disposable income, the
Wow.
data comes from the Federal Reserve. What
That's
we can see here, David, and to
that.
your viewers,
Yeah,
is something that is really, really, really alarming.
it is.
For one, we can see for the US, for the most part,
Yeah,
their disposable income, real disposable income at that,
yeah.
is for the most part higher than the housing prices, which means
Wow.
that housing in the
Yeah,
US generally, okay, of course, we can discount places like
yeah,
LA, like
yeah,
California or
yeah,
New York, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
generally, the US housing is very affordable.
yeah,
Now, if we're to look at the Canadian data
yeah,
from when this data began, I think it was in the early 70s up to
yeah,
the 1990s, late 1990s rather, housing
yeah,
was affordable in Canada.
yeah,
I
yeah,
have family friends who came here from the Philippines
yeah,
who were able to afford homes easily
yeah,
back in the 90s.
yeah.
Now, but look, since 2000, look at how housing
Wow.
prices in Canada has skyrocketed. And and look at disposable income. So disposable income is increasing, but the increase in disposable income is
Not
hasn't
sufficient.
caught up
Yeah.
with the rapid rise in housing prices. And
Wow.
this, David, this phenomenon for Canada, okay, I'm gonna stop share now.
Sure.
This
Yeah.
phenomenon in Canada is not only felt, in
Mm,
Vancouver
mm,
or in Toronto, like major cities, but also
mm-hmm,
in smaller or medium-sized and smaller cities across the country.
mm-hmm,
So this clearly is a problem. So now to your
mm,
question, what can be done?
yeah.
Number one, David, is that
Okay.
housing should be made a human right in Canada.
Mm,
It has to be a human right.
yeah.
Nobody deserves to live in the
Mm-hmm,
streets in a
mm-hmm,
country like
mm,
Canada, where in fact we're one of the most wealthiest countries on earth.
mm-hmm,
Nobody deserves to live in the street. I
mm-hmm,
mean, we get taxed so much, David. We pay a
yeah.
lot in taxes. Where
Yeah.
are taxes going?
Yeah.
Why are there people, you see in the street, they
Yeah.
live in tents? That to me
Yeah.
is heartbreaking. So that's
Yeah.
number one. We need to do
Yeah.
something in terms of housing. And the
Mm-hmm,
first thing we need to do is
mm-hmm,
to enshrine in our laws
mm,
and in our principles that housing, just like food,
mm-hmm,
the air that we breathe,
mm-hmm,
water that we drink,
mm-hmm,
and life
mm-hmm,
and housing,
mm,
these are fundamental human rights that we need to respect and have in this country. So
mm-hmm,
uh, about housing as a human right,
mm,
it hasn't really been enshrined. It's
mm,
all lip service. It
mm,
hasn't been enshrined as
mm,
a human right in this country. So that's
mm,
number one.
mm,
Second, David, is that
mm,
uh, there are people who say,
mm,
that we should stop immigration, okay?
mm,
Because immigration increases domestic demand for housing. People come in, we need to house
mm,
these people.
mm,
I say that no, the
mm,
levels of immigration that we have right now is okay,
mm,
because we need sufficient replacement rates for our population in
mhm,
order for our pension system to become sustainable.
mhm,
Okay,
mhm,
if you look at China, for example, for
mhm,
for a long time, China had a one-child policy,
mhm,
and now what they did was they recently they relaxed that policy. Why?
mhm,
Because if they continue with that policy, their pension system will collapse. So the
mm,
same idea with Canada, we need to keep a fertility rate of around 1 to 1.5 child per woman, and that can be compensated with an increase in, I mean, not really increase, but same levels of immigration that we have. So
mhm,
I think that is fine. What the federal government wants to do to cap international students is
mm,
unwise. Is unwise. Why? Because you see, Canada has become unaffordable for immigrants But nonetheless, we remain still an attractive destination for students. Our education sector is robust, and we are known all over the world to have really good schools.
Yeah.
And what Ottawa wants to do with capping international students, I think, is not wise. Now, so in terms of housing demand, my advice as an economist would be just not to touch that one, because we need people to come to this country. So we can go to housing supply now. You know, David, back in the 90s, governments, so whether that be city, province, you know, the feds, you know, they were in the business of building homes. You know, in fact, we had co-op homes back in the day. And, you know, in cities like Abbotsford, for example, or you go to Chilliwack, or any other city in Canada, you might actually see co-op housing. And those co-op housing was a product of that policy back in the 80s and 90s, when governments used to be in the business of building homes, but now not anymore. You know, so what the government needs to do is to actually funnel in resources to actually build homes. You see, the private sector does not really like building homes that are for socialized housing, for example. And how did I say that? What's my evidence? You know, David, in Montreal, the city of Montreal, they had a bylaw where private builders can, you know, they have to build homes for poor people. Okay, if they don't want to build homes for poor people, they can just pay a fine. And you know what these developers did, David? They just paid the fine.
Wow.
So that tells you that, because it's not profitable for them. Okay. So clearly, you know, if we allow free markets in this case, no firm, no private entity is willing to build socialized housing because it's not profitable for them. So this is where the government steps in. This is textbook economics 101. If it's a public good, so no private firm wants to go in. So what happens? The government steps in. That has been done in the 80s and 90s, and then the government stopped doing this. So I say, you know, if you have one of your viewers is from Ottawa, David, I hope there are people in Ottawa watching, or members of parliament, or any other policymaker. What the government needs to do is to step in. They need to create something along the lines of the Tennessee Valley Authority. You know, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, you know, for those of you who don't know the Tennessee Valley Authority, please go search it in Wikipedia or in Google. What the Tennessee Valley Authority was, it was the largest U.S. federal agency tasked to do infrastructure work in the Tennessee Valley, which spans several states, one of the poorest places in the U.S. back in the 1930s. And what happened was they did a lot of infrastructure projects. We need something along the lines of the Tennessee Valley Authority here in this country. And what it will do exclusively is just build homes, you know? And those homes, of course, are socialized housing. So the priority would be low-income people. The priority is to actually house those people in the streets. So that's one thing, you know, which is to, you know, to ensure that our people would have a shelter, you know. And one more thing I would like to add, David, you know, before before you continue on, was that one of the things that diminish housing supply in this country are those Airbnbs and VRBOs, those short-term rentals. So the thing is, we have Canadians who are wealthy enough to purchase multiple homes. And what they do is sometimes for those other homes, they just rent it out, especially if it's a condo in a city, for example, and then just rent it out short term. My take on that is those homes, they may be allowed to rent it out, but not short term. Those should be rented out to people who can be long-term tenants, because we need housing, right? And the idea, David, was that before Airbnb, we used to have hotels. So if you're visiting Vancouver, for example, we have hotels. You could go to a hotel, right? And some people say hotels are expensive than Airbnbs. You know, there's also an argument to that. But then again, we could come up with programs to actually incentivize the
Yeah.
hospitality industry to
Yeah.
lower their rates.
Yeah.
Right. So we
Yeah.
could, the government could offer them tax breaks or other, programs,
Yeah.
so that they could, increase the number of rooms that they have,
Yeah.
or have more infrastructure for hotels, but also for short-term housing. I think it decreases housing supply, and I'm of the opinion that Airbnbs, for example, should be discouraged, especially at this time when we have really serious constraints in housing supply.
Finally, Michael, do you have advice for future students as to why they should consider studying economics?
Oh, that is a very excellent question. It's very timely, David, because in a few weeks we will have an open house here at U of V, and since we had this open house, I've always been a presence there, and families would come and ask me questions like, "What is economics?" And you can believe it, David, many people actually don't know what it is. They don't know what economists do. I think to answer your question, we have to go back to the fundamental definition of what what economics is. So economics actually is a study of how we allocate resources.
Yeah.
And why do we allocate resources? Because of scarcity. There's not enough resources out there. Moments ago, you and I we're talking about housing. Why are we talking about housing? Why do we have a crisis right now? Because there are not enough homes for people. Right? Because housing is scarce. Right? So when scarcity happens, David, we have economics. Okay. So in other words, as long as we live in a world where resources remain scarce, we need economists to enlighten us, on how do we address the issue of scarcity. Okay. So, and scarcity, you can find it everywhere in all sectors. Finance, consumer studies, banks, insurance, governments, universities, almost everywhere, David, there is a need for an economist. So that means that in terms of employment outcomes, if you have an economics degree, your employment outcome should be good. And in fact, and I'm going to take this opportunity to actually promote our program, David, is that we have excellent outcomes for our graduates because of the fact that you can find there's a need rather for economists everywhere. So, I mean, if you decide to pursue an economics degree, I think it's a good option, just like business, David, right? So if you're a business graduate, it's very flexible. Why? Because just like business, in economics, you will learn transferable skills. Okay, transferable skills that you can bring to different places. Data analysis, policy analysis, for example, even soft skills like teamwork, like those things you will learn or you will acquire them if you have an economics degree. So yes, so employment outcomes are good, and in fact, economists are one of the most well-paid, careers, out there. So employment outcome is good if that's your plan. And of course, if you're the type that, would like to do research, or want to teach, it's also a good pathway to becoming a professor. Right? So we do have very reputable doctoral programs in Canada, for example. So there are many pathways. So that's what I tell potential students who would want to be or want to become an economist. Don't be like me, where I went to the booth because I saw there was nobody there. I went there and gave my paperwork to that person in the booth saying that, okay, I'm gonna be I want to enroll in the economics program. We're not like that anymore. Okay, so your decision, so whoever's watching this video, your decision has to be an informed one, and I hope that I was able to provide you with that kind of information for you to decide to become an economist.
Thank you very much for your time, Michael. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, David, for your time as well.